The air clung to me, heavy with the promise of summer, but something else lingered, a whisper of wrongness I couldn't name. It was the last day of 6th grade, the final bell still echoing in my ears as I stepped out of Lincoln Middle School. I was 12 years old then, all knobby knees and a backpack slung over one shoulder. Home was a 5-minute walk, a path I'd tread 1,000 times, but today my feet itched for something new. Why not take a shortcut, I thought, a spark of adventure flaring in my chest. I'd done it before, cutting through alleys to shave, off a minute or two, but this time I veered left onto Willow Lane, a street I'd never walked before, a street that seemed to hold its breath as I approached. Willow Lane wasn't like the rest of the neighborhood. The houses here stood silent, their windows dark, some boarded up, others staring blankly like eyes without souls. The paint peeled in long curling strips, and the lawns were choked with weeds that swayed in a breeze I couldn't feel. It's just a street, I told myself, but my skin prickled, a warning I brushed aside. The quiet was unnatural. No birds, no distant hum of lawnmowers, just the soft crunch of my sneakers on cracked pavement. I was close to home, I reasoned, close enough to be safe. But safe from what? The question hung in my mind, unanswered. As I pressed forward, the weight of the empty houses pressing back. Up ahead, a car sat crookedly against the curb, its driver's side door yawning open like a trap waiting to snap shut. Who leaves a car like that? My stomach twisted, a knot of unease tightening with every step. I couldn't see inside from this distance, couldn't tell if someone was slumped in the seat or lurking just out of sight. I'd always hated strangers, adults especially, when I was alone. Their voices, their questions, they always felt like hooks trying to pull me somewhere I didn't want to go. Keep walking, I commanded myself, fishing my phone from my pocket. I pressed it to my ear, pretending to talk, my voice a low murmur of nonsense to ward off anyone who might approach. The car loomed closer now, its open door a black void against the faded gray of the street. My pulse quickened, a drumbeat urging me to turn back, but I was too stubborn, too close to home to admit I was scared. "Excuse me." The voice sliced through the silence, low and rough, like gravel underfoot. "Excuse me." It came again, insistent, pulling my eyes toward the car against my will. My breath caught, a sharp hitch in my throat as I saw him, a man sitting in the driver's seat, his face turned toward me. My heart plummeted, a stone sinking into a frozen lake. He looked exactly like my substitute teacher from that year. The same wiry build, the same sharp jaw, the same gap where a tooth should have been. I'd sat in his class for weeks, listening to his droning lectures on fractions, but this wasn't him. It couldn't be. Because his eyes, oh God, his eyes were wrong. They weren't eyes at all, but twin pools of ink, blacker than night, blacker than anything I'd ever seen. No whites, no irises, just a void that seemed to pull at me, to drink in the light around it. They looked natural, as if he'd been born with them, but they were wrong, a violation of everything human. Our eyes locked and the world stopped. Time thickened, each second stretching into eternity. My body betrayed me, rooted to the spot, my legs heavy as stone. Those eyes didn't blink, didn't waver. They bored into me, peeling away layers of who I was until I was nothing but fear. "Run! Run!" a voice screamed inside me, but my muscles wouldn't obey. The air grew colder, sharper, like a blade against my skin. His lips parted, just a fraction, and I swear I saw the hint of a smile, a knowing curl that said he saw me all, of me, and there was nowhere to hide. "Move!" The command broke through and I turned, my sneakers slamming against the pavement as I sprinted toward home. I didn't look back, didn't dare. My chest burned, my stomach churned, a sickening weight that told me something was wrong. Deeply, irreversibly wrong. The street blurred around me, houses melting into shadows, until I burst through my front door, slamming it shut as if that could keep him out. I collapsed against the wall, gasping, my hands trembling as I clutched. My knees, what was that? My mind raced, replaying the image of those eyes, that face. My substitute teacher, but not my substitute teacher. A memory flickered, something I'd read just weeks before. A story about black-eyed people, beings that looked human but weren't, that asked for help or entry, only to bring... What? Harm? Death? I hadn't believed it then, had laughed it off as a creepy tale for late-night forums. But now, it was real as the sweat soaking my shirt, as real as the terror that clung to me like damp fog. Had I seen one of them? The thought clawed at me, refusing to let go. I was 19 now, years removed from that day, but the memory hadn't faded. It lived in me, a shadow that stirred every time I passed a quiet street, every time I saw an open car door. They say black-eyed people come back, the stories whispered, and I couldn't shake the fear that he was still out there waiting, his hollow gaze searching for me. Every night I check the locks twice, my heart pounding as I peer through the curtains. I've told almost no one, knowing how it sounds, crazy, impossible. But I saw what I saw, felt what I felt. That man, that thing, wasn't my teacher, wasn't human. It wore his face like a mask, but those eyes, they were a doorway to something else, something that knew me and wanted me to know it back. And deep down, I'm terrified it's not done with me yet. We were in Cancun, my wife Elena and I chasing a slice of paradise. The resort was a mosaic of turquoise pools and swaying palms, the kind of place where worries dissolve into the warm, salty air. It was our third night, and we'd just returned from a dinner that felt like a love letter to Mexico. Spicy ceviche, laughter over margaritas, the glow of candlelight on Elena's face. The memory still lingers, vivid, like a photograph you can't stop staring at. But as we stepped into our room, something felt off, like the air had thickened. The Do Not Disturb sign hung proudly on the door, a silent guardian of our privacy. We tossed our sandals by the bed, the hum of the air conditioner a soft lullaby. I was about to collapse onto the crisp sheets when a faint knock echoed from the door. Not loud, not urgent, but insistent, like someone testing the waters. Elena froze, her eyes darting to mine. "Who could that be?" she whispered, her voice barely cutting through the hum of the AC. It was late, past 10 p.m., and the resort felt asleep, its corridors hushed. Another knock, sharper this time, followed by a muffled voice, low and lilting, speaking Spanish in a tone that sounded rehearsed, like a waiter offering room service. But we hadn't ordered anything. I motioned for Elena to stay back, my heart starting to thud, a primal rhythm I couldn't ignore. "Stay calm," I told myself, but the air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. I crept toward the door, my bare feet silent on the cool tile. No sound came from us, not a creak, not a breath. The knocks had stopped, and for a moment, I thought whoever it was had left. Then with a soft beep, the lock clicked. The door swung inward, slow and deliberate, revealing a man standing in the dim hallway light. He was wiry, his clothes rumpled, his face shadowed by a cap pulled low. His eyes flicked up, meeting mine, and I swear they widened, not in fear, but in surprise, like he hadn't expected me to be there. 2 feet separated us, close enough to smell the faint tang of sweat and dust on him. My hand shot to the door, gripping it to keep it from opening further. "What do you want?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. My chest tightened, every nerve screaming to act, to protect. Elena stood behind me, her breath shallow, her silhouette a fragile outline in the room's soft glow. He stammered, his words tumbling out in broken English. "Wi-Fi, is it down? I check for you?" His voice was too casual, like an actor forgetting his lines. The word Wi-Fi hung in the air, absurd, a flimsy mask for something darker. I glanced at Elena, her face pale, her eyes locked on the stranger. "It's fine," she said, her voice steady but thin. "He's lying." My mind screamed. The do not disturb sign, the late hour, the key card in his hand. None of it added up. This wasn't a mistake. This was a predator testing his prey, a thief who thought the room was empty. My grip on the door tightened, my knuckles white. "Leave," I said, low and firm, an embedded command laced with warning. He hesitated, his gaze flickering between us, calculating. For a moment I thought he'd push forward, force his way in. My mind raced with images of what could happen. Our belongings gone, or worse, Elena hurt, trapped in this room with no one to hear us. But then, as if sensing the shift in my resolve, he muttered something in Spanish and backed away, his footsteps fading down the hall. I slammed the door shut, engaging the deadbolt with a heavy clunk. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in, the air thick with the aftertaste of fear. Elena sank onto the bed, her hands trembling as she clutched a pillow. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't have an answer, only a gnawing dread that clung to me like damp cloth. We sat in silence, replaying the moment, each detail sharper than the last. The key card, a tool meant to keep us safe, had betrayed us. The resort, our haven, now felt like a stage for unseen threats. What if we'd been asleep? The thought coiled in my gut, cold and unrelenting. What if we'd returned 5 minutes later, stepping into a room already stripped bare? Or worse, what if he'd been bolder, armed, unafraid? I remembered a story my cousin told me years ago, about a hotel in Miami, where thieves used master keys to slip into rooms at night. He'd laughed it off, called it bad luck. But now, that story wasn't funny. It was a warning, a nested tale, that anchored my fear, making this moment feel not just real, but inevitable. We called the front desk, our voices shaking as we recounted the incident. The clerk sounded concerned, promised to investigate, but her words felt hollow, like a script read too many times. "We take security seriously," she said. But did they? The key card in that man's hand said otherwise. For the rest of the night, we didn't sleep. We sat on the bed, the TV flickering with some Spanish game show, its laughter jarring against the tension in our bones. Every creak of the building, every distant footstep, sent my heart racing again. I kept seeing his face, those calculating eyes, the way he'd stood just inches from me, testing the boundary between safety and chaos. By morning, we'd made a plan. Our valuables, passports, cash, Elena's necklace from her mother, went into the room safe, the code memorized, the door checked twice. The deadbolt became our ritual, a small act of defiance against the fragility of our trust. But even as we packed for the beach, the sun streaming through the curtains, the memory of that night clung to us. It wasn't just a door that opened that night. It was a crack in the illusion of safety, a reminder that even in paradise, danger waits for a single moment of vulnerability. This is the story of how a fleeting crush became a shadow that haunted me for years, a shadow named Kyle. It started innocently, as most horrors do, in the haze of teenage heartbreak and lonely nights. But innocence has a way of rotting when obsession takes root. Back in junior high, I was tangled in a messy, on-again, off-again romance with my boyfriend, the boy who'd later become my husband. We were kids, barely grasping what love meant, so our relationship was a roller coaster of passion and pain. By high school, we'd crashed for good, or so I thought. The breakup left me hollow, a ghost drifting through the halls of my small town school. Friends I'd once laughed with turned their backs, caught up in their own dramas, leaving me to wander alone in the fog of my thoughts. It was 2020, the world locked down by the pandemic, and with nothing but time and silence, I sank into the digital escape of online gaming. That's where I found them. A group of guys from my school who played the same battle royale game I'd gotten hooked on. They were loud, chaotic, and welcoming in a way that felt like a lifeline. There was the jokester, always cracking one-liners, the quiet strategist plotting our moves, and Kyle, the one who stood out. Kyle wasn't my type, lanky with a crooked smile and a laugh that cut through the static of our voice chats. But he was easy to talk to, his words wrapping around me, like a warm blanket on those cold, isolated nights. I didn't realize then that warmth could hide something sinister, like a flame waiting to devour. Our friendship bloomed in the glow of computer screens, hours spent strategizing and laughing, until dawn. But as weeks turned to months, I felt a spark for Kyle. It wasn't love, just a flicker of affection born from shared moments and his relentless charm. I told him I liked him but wasn't ready to date, still nursing the wounds of my breakup. His response was a crack in the facade, a glimpse of something darker. He didn't take it well. His messages turned sharp, demanding I commit, accusing me of leading him on when I asked for space. He'd explode, kicking me out of group chats, spreading lies to turn the others against me. It never worked. The guys stayed loyal. But Kyle's rage was a storm I couldn't escape. His clinginess wasn't just needy, it was manipulative, a leash tightening around my throat. He'd text me at 2 a.m., asking if I still liked him, his words dripping with desperation. If I didn't reply fast enough, he'd flood my phone with accusations, each one a needle in my chest. We kissed once or twice, fleeting moments in the heat of a party. But we were never official. Yet those kisses were enough to chain me to his obsession, a mistake I'd pay for years later. When I learned others in the group also had feelings for me, the dynamic shattered. I cut ties with them all, desperate to escape the suffocating drama. Months later, my boyfriend and I rekindled our spark, stronger this time, built on the ashes of our past. We were happy, planning a future together. When he proposed, our engagement photos lit up Instagram, a beacon of joy in a world that felt heavy. But joy casts shadows, and mine had a name. The day after we posted, Kyle texted me, his words casual, but laced with an edge I couldn't place. He wanted to meet, catch up, as if years hadn't passed since his last outburst. My boyfriend, ever the optimist, suggested we give it a chance, a naive attempt to mend old wounds before he left for military training. I agreed, though my gut screamed to stay away. Kyle picked us up in his beat-up sedan, his grin too wide, his eyes too bright, like a predator savoring its prey. The air in that car felt thick, like breathing through a shroud. We drove to the mall, walked through crowds, grabbed food, normal mundane things that should have felt safe. But Kyle's smile was a mask, his gaze cutting through us, not at us. His laughter was hollow, a sound that echoed in my bones. As night fell, he suggested we drive through town. No destination, just aimless cruising. That's when the world, tilted and normal, became a nightmare. Kyle's foot pressed harder on the gas, the speedometer climbing past 100 in a 30 zone. Streetlights blurred into streaks of light, red lights ignored as we hurtled through intersections. My heart pounded, a caged bird desperate to escape. He swerved around corners, tires screeching, the car shaking like it might tear apart. Boyfriend tried to laugh it off, thinking Kyle was showing off, but I saw the truth in Kyle's eyes. Cold, unhinged, a void where humanity should have been. He mentioned the seatbelts were broken, his voice casual, as if he didn't care if we lived or died. Then came the words that froze my blood. I don't feel anything when people die. No sadness, no guilt. I might be a little psychotic. My boyfriend's awkward chuckle couldn't mask the tension. My hands gripped the seat, nails digging into fabric as the world outside became a blur of death waiting to claim us. Kyle turned up the music, blasting songs he'd written, songs about me. The lyrics were a twisted mirror, painting me as a betrayer, a siren who'd ruined him. Each note was a knife carving into my sense of safety. My boyfriend and I exchanged a glance, a silent agreement that we were trapped with a monster. Finally, Kyle pulled into a massive park, its new staircase climbing a mountain under a moonless sky. The darkness was a living thing, swallowing the world beyond the car. He suggested a walk and we leapt out, desperate to escape the suffocating confines of his vehicle. The staircase loomed, its steps vanishing into the night, a path to nowhere. My old basketball injury flared, forcing me to stop halfway. Kyle stayed with me, his voice low, intimate, as he spoke of never getting closure, of dreaming about me, of never connecting with anyone else. His words were a spider's web, wrapping tighter with every syllable, while my boyfriend stood nearby, his patience fraying. My boyfriend tried to keep things light, but Kyle's intensity grew. His eyes locked on me like I was his possession. He strode ahead, calling us to the top, where an unfinished ledge hung over a cement abyss. "Come up here," he said, his voice a siren's call to destruction. "The drop is crazy." My boyfriend refused, sensing the danger, and we started back to the car. The silence in that car was heavier than before, Kyle's hands twitching on the wheel. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "If I had a gun right now, I don't know what I'd do." His voice was ice, emotionless, a promise of violence that made my body lock up. My boyfriend leaned forward, asking if he was okay, but Kyle's smirk was a blade in the dark. "Just making conversation," he said, but the lie hung heavy. We begged to go home, but he ignored us, driving in circles until a cop car appeared in the parking lot. Kyle's panic was electric, his hands slamming the wheel, his breath ragged. He muttered something about claiming we were having a threesome, if pulled over, a nonsensical plan that made my skin crawl. The cop passed and Kyle sped us home, silent, not even glancing back as we stumbled out. That night, my boyfriend and I lay awake, the weight of what we'd escaped pressing down like a coffin lid. We agreed Kyle wasn't just unhinged, he was dangerous, a predator we'd narrowly evaded. The way he'd stood on that ledge, staring down, felt like he'd been waiting for us to fall. We cut all contact, but the fear lingered, a stain on my soul. Weeks later, we met old friends from the gaming group, hoping for normalcy. They'd cut ties with Kyle too, and their stories painted a darker picture. Kyle had dated a girl, Sarah, who cheated on one of them, sparking a messy fallout. Sarah got pregnant, claiming the baby wasn't Kyle's, and when the child was born, it resembled another man. Kyle's reaction was a descent into madness, drinking, punching walls, threatening friends. He'd vanished for days, only to reappear like nothing happened, his smile a mask over something broken. When I mentioned our night with Kyle, the car ride, the ledge, they weren't surprised. "Sounds like him," one said, dismissing him as jealous but harmless. But their eyes betrayed the truth. They knew he was a ticking bomb. They revealed that when Kyle learned of my engagement, He'd spiraled, drinking himself into a rage, attacking a gentle friend on the spectrum. Then he disappeared again, leaving only silence. Life moved on. My boyfriend shipped out for training, and I moved in with my parents in a secluded community. Their house at the end of a dirt road surrounded by acres of quiet. But quiet doesn't mean safe. Kyle's messages started again, polite at first, asking to hang out before my boyfriend left. I brushed him off, but the unease grew. One night, I saw a car like his creep past our dirt road, its headlights slicing through the dark. My dad sat on the porch with his rifle, a silent guardian, but the fear was a knot in my chest. Then came the Instagram notifications, burner accounts viewing my stories, always the first to watch, vanishing when I blocked them, only to be replaced by new ones. Each ping was a whisper from the void, a reminder that Kyle was watching. Messages followed, cryptic rants about loyalty and betrayal, ending with, "You're lucky. It could have been different, but I let it go." Let what go? He signed one. It's Kyle, by the way, as if I wouldn't know. I blocked him, set my account private, and prayed he'd fade. 6 months later, my boyfriend and I reunited, moving to a military base far from our hometown. The distance felt like freedom, a new dawn after a long night. But freedom is fragile. A call from our old friends shattered the calm. "Did you hear about Kyle?" they asked. He'd tried to break into Sarah's house, claiming her baby was his. He'd held the child, stabbed Sarah in the chaos, and was arrested. But the worst was yet to come. In his possession, police found a notebook, its pages filled with our names, Sarah's and mine. Graphic, violent fantasies of killing my boyfriend, of claiming us, of ending us all if he couldn't have us. 3 years later, I still wake from nightmares. Kyle's face on that ledge burned into my mind. I dread the day I'll have to warn my children about high school flings, how a kiss can spark a decade of vengeance. I think of that staircase, his voice calling us to the drop, and wonder what would have happened if we'd followed. If my knee hadn't stopped me, if my boyfriend hadn't refused, if that cop hadn't spooked him. Maybe I wouldn't be here, telling this story, my voice trembling with the weight of what could have been. It wasn't the darkness that scared me at first. It was the silence, the kind that swallows your thoughts and leaves you questioning what's real. I stood in my aunt's basement, the air thick with dust and secrets, my heart pounding as if it knew something I didn't. The clock on my phone read 10 songs a.m. when I'd stumbled in, exhausted from a night drowned in cheap liquor and bad decisions. But now, as I blinked into the dim glow of a flickering bulb, the world felt wrong. Time felt wrong. And something was watching me from the shadows. I'd come to Aunt Clara's house to crash after 2 nights of reckless drinking. Her place was a sanctuary, tucked away in a quiet rural corner where the world seemed to pause. She'd offered me the basement, a cramped, musty space with a sagging futon and walls that seemed to lean inward. I didn't care. I just needed sleep. The stairs creaked as I descended, each step sinking me deeper into a stillness that felt alive, like the house was holding its breath. The air was heavy, laced with the scent of damp concrete and something sharper, almost metallic. I collapsed onto the futon, the springs groaning under my weight, and closed my eyes, expecting oblivion. But sleep wouldn't come. I tossed, my body restless, my mind caught in a haze of half-formed thoughts. The basement was too quiet, the i.e., kind of quiet that amplifies every small sound, the drip of a distant pipe, the faint hum of the furnace. I checked my phone, expecting a few minutes had passed. 9 p.m. The numbers stared back, unyielding. 11 hours gone. My stomach twisted, a cold knot forming. Had I slept, passed out? The bulb overhead flickered, casting jagged shadows that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. I sat up, my breath shallow, trying to convince myself it was just fatigue playing tricks. I fumbled for the old gaming console Aunt Clara kept down here, hoping the familiar glow of a screen would anchor me. The TV hissed to life, its static buzz filling the void. I played for what felt like 10 minutes, my thumbs moving mechanically. But the unease grew, a weight pressing on my chest. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling, willing sleep to take. The air grew colder, the shadows thicker. I checked my phone again, 2 a.m., another 5 hours vanished. My heart raced, a primal instinct screaming that something was wrong. "You're not alone," a voice whispered in my mind, unbidden. I pushed it away, but the basement felt smaller now, the walls closing in like a trap. I texted my cousin Liam, who was supposed to pick me up. "Be there soon," he replied. I needed to get out, to breathe air that didn't taste like fear. The basement windows were high, barely slits letting in slivers of moonlight. I dragged a stool over, my hands trembling, and climbed up to peer outside. The night was still, the street empty. But as I stared, a sharp grating sound tore through the silence. A slow, deliberate scratch against the concrete wall, inches from my ear. My blood froze. I turned, expecting to see nothing, praying for nothing. The basement was empty, but the air pulsed with something unseen, something that knew I was here. I stumbled off the stool, my legs unsteady, and moved to the other window across the room. The furnace kicked on, its usual 2 thuds echoing like a heartbeat. But then 4 rapid bangs followed, sharp and unnatural, like fists pounding in anger. My eyes darted to the stairs, the only way out. Did something move? A shape, fleeting and formless, seemed to peek from behind the staircase, its edges blurring into the dark. My breath caught, my mind screaming to run, but my body froze. "It's nothing," I told myself, clinging to logic. "You've been here before. You're fine." But the lie felt hollow. I forced myself toward the second window, each step heavier than the last. The basement wasn't just dark, it was alive, its shadows twisting with intent. I reached the window, my hands gripping the sill, and looked up. There it was. A figure 7 or 8 feet tall stood in the corner where the stairs met the... Well, it wasn't human. Its form was a void, a silhouette carved from darkness, too solid to be a trick of light. Its head tilted as if studying me, and though I couldn't see eyes, I felt its gaze. Cold, ancient, hungry. My chest tightened, a scream trapped in my throat. Don't show fear, I thought, desperation clawing at me. If you're not scared, can't hurt you. I turned back to the window, pretending I hadn't seen it, my heart hammering so loud I thought it would betray me. The glass was cold against my palms, the outside world a distant dream. I stood there, seconds stretching, into eternity, willing Liam's car to appear. The figure didn't move, but its presence was a weight, a promise of something unspeakable. You can't look away, can you? The thought wasn't mine, but it slithered into my mind, curling like smoke. I heard it again, the scratch, slower, now deliberate, like nails carving a message into the wall. The furnace thudded once, twice, then a single deafening bang that shook the floor. I couldn't stay. I bolted for the stairs, my feet slipping on the concrete, the air thick with malice. The shadow loomed larger as I passed, its form stretching toward me, but I didn't look back. I climbed, my hands clawing at the railing, the stairs creaking, under my weight. The door at the top was a beacon, and I threw it open, bursting into the night. The street was empty, the air crisp and real. Headlights flashed. Liam's car pulling up just in time. I dove inside, slamming the door, my voice shaking as I spilled the story. "Something's down there," I gasped. "It wasn't human. It wanted me." Liam listened, his face pale, but he didn't laugh. He'd heard stories about that basement, whispers of things older than the house, things that lingered in the dark. As we drove away, I glanced back. The basement windows glowed faintly, and for a moment I swore I saw it. The shadow pressed against the glass, watching me leave. I haven't been back since. But at night, when silence falls, I hear it. The scratch, the thud, the whisper, something waiting. And I know it's still there in the dark beneath the stairs, hungry for the next soul to stumble into its grasp. The neon hum of the 7-Eleven sign pulsed like a warning in the twilight, its sickly green light spilling over the empty parking lot where I stood, my breath catching in the cold air. I was 19, a drifter in my own life, tethered to a town that felt like a cage. This store was my escape, a fleeting pause where I could grab a soda and pretend the world wasn't pressing in. But that night, as the horizon swallowed the last of the sun, the air turned thick, almost alive, and I felt it. A gaze, heavy and unseen, boring into me from the shadows. Back then, I was barely holding together. My life was a tangle of unpaid bills, a dead-end job, and a family that had long since stopped listening. To breathe, I'd wander to the used bookstore in the strip mall, where the musty scent of old novels offered a kind of sanctuary. I'd trade dog-eared paperbacks for credit, losing hours in stories that let me forget. The 7-Eleven nearby was just a stopover, a place to snag a drink before retreating to the books. That evening I'd stayed too long, the bookstore's warmth clinging to me as I stepped into the cooling dusk, my bag heavy with new trades. I crossed the lot, the asphalt gritty under my worn sneakers. The 7-Eleven sign buzzed, casting my shadow in sharp, unnatural angles. Inside, the store was a sterile glare, fluorescent lights bleaching the aisles. Two men loomed behind the counter, their presence like a stain on the too-clean space. One, broad-shouldered with a faded name tag, eyed me as I reached for a soda, his stare lingering too long. The other, lean and twitchy with a greasy ponytail, was wiping down the counter, but his eyes tracked me, cold and calculating. I kept my head down, the can's chill grounding me as I moved to the register. Out late for a kid, huh? The cashier's voice was a low rasp slicing through the store's hum. My stomach twisted. "I'm 20, I said, sliding my ID across for a pack of cigarettes, my voice tighter than I meant. He held the ID up, squinting like it was a puzzle, then grinned, too wide. 20, look more like 15, right? The wiry guy smirked, his eyes glinting like wet glass. Younger, even. Their laughter was a jagged thing, scraping at my nerves. I snatched my change and hurried out, the door's chime mocking me as I fled. In the lot, I fumbled for a cigarette, the lighter's flame dancing in the dark. The bookstore was closed now, its windows black, and the idea of home felt like surrender. I lingered, the soda can sweating in one hand, the cigarette's glow a faint shield. Then I saw the cashier step outside, his silhouette hulking against the store's glow. He lit a cigarette, his movement slow, deliberate, but his eyes found me unblinking like a hunter marking a target. I turned away, my heart thudding, but the weight of his gaze clung to me, pulling tighter with every step. Have you ever walked somewhere familiar and felt it turn alien, like the ground itself might betray you? That's how the parking lot felt as I searched for my car, my keys jangling like a warning. I'd parked near the bookstore, but the lot was a labyrinth now, cars hulking under the streetlight's orange haze. I was cutting between two vans when the wiry guy appeared, his ponytail swaying, his smile a twisted promise. Left something behind, he said, his voice soft but edged with menace. My pulse spiked. I've got to get to work, I said, stepping forward, but he shifted, blocking me, his arm a barrier I'd have to brush past. The soda can felt like a toy in my hand, useless against his bulk. Come back inside, he urged, his tone curling around me like smoke. The cashier wants your number. We've got a party at 5 back of the store. Drinks, good times. His words were a trap, polished and practiced, but the clock read 4:30, and the idea of a party in that fluorescent cage made my skin crawl. I'm late, I said, backing up, but he advanced, his shadow merging with mine. Just one. Drink? He pressed, his eyes gleaming with something feral. The lot was silent. No cars, no voices. Just the distant drone of a highway, too far to matter. It's like stepping into a nightmare where every choice feels wrong, but you're forced to move. I turned toward the store, not out of trust, but desperation. The cameras inside were my only hope. The wiry guy trailed me, his footsteps too close, his breath a sour tang in the air. As we neared the entrance, I glimpsed 2 cops exiting, their badges glinting under the neon. My heart surged, safety maybe, but they climbed into their car before I could speak, the engine's roar swallowing my chance. I cursed my hesitation, my distrust of uniforms, but it was too late. Inside, the store was a claustrophobic trap, the lights searing my eyes. The cashier stood at the counter, a line of tiny liquor bottles arranged like bait. Got these for you, he said, his grin a blade. Party's gonna be something else. Booze, vibes, you'll love it. His voice was a lure, but I saw through it. No party, just a lie to pull me deeper. The wiry guy hovered by the door, his body a wall between me and freedom. Give me your number, the cashier said, leaning closer, his breath stale with coffee and smoke. We'll hook you up. My hands shook, the soda can and book bag laughably small against their threat. Fear can remake you, sharpen your edges until you're someone new. I nodded, faking compliance, and recited a fake number, the 555 kind from old TV shows. I'll hit the next one, I said, my voice steady despite the terror clawing my throat. The cashier's eyes narrowed, sensing the deception, but he stayed silent. The wiry guy, though, edged closer, his fingers grazing the doorframe. Why wait? He murmured, his voice a blade against my spine. I sidestepped, my shoulder brushing the counter, and moved for the door, forcing my steps to stay calm. There, stairs burned into me, a promise of pursuit I couldn't shake. Outside, the night was a void, but I couldn't risk my car. They'd see it, maybe tail me. I headed for a dollar store down the street, its dim lights a fragile lifeline. My fingers trembled as I called the dad of the kids I watched, my voice fracturing. I need help, I choked out, tears blurring my vision. He was there in minutes, his car a beacon in the dark. I dove inside, glancing back to see the cashier and the wiry guy at the 7-Eleven's window, their silhouettes etched against the neon glow. We drove wordlessly, the town's lights smearing past. In the passenger seat, I spotted a hammer tucked beside a toolbox. Ready to play hero? I asked, a shaky laugh escaping. He glanced over, his face grim. Sometimes you gotta be ready for anything. His words anchored me, pulling me from the brink. We grabbed my car later, the 7-Eleven dark now, but the memory of those men was a weight I couldn't shed. Weeks later, the fear lingered, a shadow that followed me everywhere. Friends I told spun theories, kidnapping, trafficking, or worse. I didn't know their plan, but it wasn't harmless. That 7-Eleven, once a nothing stop, was now a place where safety dissolved, where neon hid monsters in plain sight. And I drive. By sometimes, but I never stop. The flicker of that false safety is too vivid, and I'm not sure I'd outrun it again. The forest exhaled a warning, its breath cold and heavy, but I was too young, too reckless to listen. At 14, the world was a challenge I thought I could conquer, and Panther Creek Trail in northern Georgia was my proving ground. My mother and I, city dwellers from Atlanta's concrete sprawl, had never set foot on a real trail before, but the promise of Panther Creek Falls, a cascade of wild beauty hidden deep in the wilderness, called to us. I wanted to stand at its edge, to feel invincible. That afternoon, the trail stretched before us, a ribbon of dirt and rock winding through towering pines and tangled underbrush, its air thick with the scent of moss and earth. But as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of amber and shadow, something in the forest shifted, a silent pulse that whispered, "You shouldn't be here." We'd been hiking for hours, maybe 4 or 5 miles, our boots scuffing against roots and stones. A couple ahead of us, their voices a soft hum, had been our only company, their presence a comfort in this unfamiliar place. But at the 2/3 mark, they stopped, their words sharp with concern. "It's getting late," the man said, glancing at the darkening sky. "We should turn back." My mother overheard, her face tightening with worry. "They're right," she said, her hand on my arm. "It's too risky." The trail had grown treacherous. Narrow paths clung to hillsides, with no fences to guard against drops of 50, 100, even 150 feet into the boulder-strewn creek below. One section, a mere 8 inches wide, forced us to shimmy across a sheer rock face, our fingers clawing at the stone for balance. But I was 14, untouchable. "I can make it," I insisted, my voice brimming with bravado. "I'll get to the falls and catch up with you." She argued, her eyes pleading, but my stubbornness won. With a reluctant nod, she turned back, and I pressed on alone. The falls were everything I'd imagined. Water roaring over jagged cliffs, mist rising like spirits from the pool below. I snapped photos, the fading light casting long shadows across the rocks. I did it, I thought, a thrill of triumph warming my chest. But triumph was fleeting. The sky darkened faster than I'd expected, the forest swallowing the last of the day. I need to get back. The trail, so clear in daylight, now vanished into a sea of black, my phone's feeble flashlight the only guide. Its beam barely reached. 3 feet, a trembling circle of light in a world of endless dark. My backpack held water, a knife, a few snacks, small comforts against the growing dread. The forest was alive with sounds, rustling leaves, snapping twigs, the distant hoot of an owl. Just animals, I told myself, but my heart raced, a drumbeat of fear I couldn't silence. I gripped my knife, its weight a fragile shield, and kept moving, each step a battle against the unknown. An hour into the return, the trail narrowed to that cursed ledge again. "Stay focused," I commanded, tucking the phone in my pocket to free a hand. My fingers grazed the rock, cold and slick, as I inched across, the void below a hungry maw waiting for a misstep. The knife slipped from my hand, tumbling silently for an agonizing seconds before a faint metallic clink echoed from the depths. If I fall, I'm gone. My breath hitched, panic clawing at my throat, but I made it across, collapsing onto solid ground. "Keep going." My phone, now at 3% battery, flickered ominously. I checked for signal. Nothing. No mom, no help. Tears stung my eyes, the weight of my foolishness crushing me. The darkness was absolute, a living thing that pressed against my skin, whispering of things unseen. And then from that blackness he appeared. He stepped from the void, a shadow given form, and my world stopped. A man walking toward me from the trail's opposite end, his silhouette stark against the faint glow of my phone. No flashlight, no lantern, just a small backpack slung over one shoulder. How? The trail was a nightmare even with light. Without it, it was suicide. My pulse thundered as I took him in. Tall, lean, his face a mask of stillness, his eyes. God, his eyes. They were empty, not dark but lifeless, like glass marbles staring through me, past me, into some place I couldn't see. "Hey, what's up, man?" I stammered, my voice cracking. "I'm just trying to get out of here." He didn't respond, didn't blink, just kept walking, his steps silent, unnatural, as if the forest parted for him. I jumped aside, my back pressed against a tree, and watched him pass, expecting him to turn, to speak. He didn't. "He's not human," a voice in my head screamed, and the air grew colder, heavier, like a hand squeezing my lungs. I ran. My feet pounded the trail, branches snagging at my clothes, my phone's dying light bobbing wildly. That man, that thing, what was he? A ghost? A predator stalking the lost? My mind raced with stories I'd heard. Hikers vanishing, trails haunted. By things that didn't belong. He saw me, he knows I'm here. The thought drove me faster, through trees, toward the distant hum of cars, the flicker of lights on the highway. I stumbled onto the road, gasping, and used the last of my battery to call my mother. She found me at a gas station 2 miles away, her tears soaking my shirt as she hugged me, her car accidentally grazing my foot in her panic. "What happened?" she asked, but I could barely speak. The man's eyes, his silence, they clung to me, a shadow I couldn't shake. Years later, I'm 22 and I've never set foot on a trail again. My mother and I were not hikers, never were, and that night sealed it. I told her everything, the darkness, the knife, the man who walked without light. She believes me, but we don't talk about it. Was he real? I still don't know. A ghost, a figment of my fear, or something worse, something that hunts the reckless in the dark. All I know is that every night, when I close my eyes, I see him. His dead gaze, his silent steps, and I wonder if he's still out there waiting for me to return to the trail. And I never will. It was a Saturday at Southwest Minnesota State University. The kind of day when the campus felt like a ghost town. No lectures, no chatter in the halls, just an eerie stillness that wrapped around the buildings like a fog. I was 20, a sophomore, juggling classes and a part-time job at the campus store. With 30 minutes to kill before my shift, I decided to rest in the main building, sinking into a worn leather couch in the lounge. The air smelled of old coffee and dusty books, the kind of scent that made you feel safe, cocooned in routine. I closed my eyes not to sleep but to savor the quiet. The hum of a distant vending machine was the only sound, a soft anchor to reality. My body relaxed, the weight of the week melting away. Breathe, I told myself, letting the moment stretch. But then, a gentle tap on my shoulder jolted me upright. My eyes snapped open, heart lurching. No footsteps had warned me, no rustle of movement. Standing before me was a man, bald, with a face etched in sharp lines, like a statue worn by time. His eyes, cold and unblinking, locked onto mine. "Where's the social science building?" he asked, his voice flat, almost mechanical. I blinked, disoriented. Everyone on campus knew that building. It was an 8-minute walk, impossible to miss. Down the hall, far end," I stammered, pointing vaguely. He nodded, a single stiff motion, and walked away, his shoes silent on the tile. Something about him gnawed at me. His presence felt wrong, like a shadow cast without a source. I shook it off, settling back into the couch. But the air had changed. heavier now, pressing against my chest. Just nerves, I thought, closing my eyes again. But the world shifted. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't on the couch. I was standing on the upper floor of the social science building. The familiar lecture halls replaced by a labyrinth of identical doors and flickering fluorescent lights. My stomach twisted, a cold knot of dread. How did I get here? I had no memory of walking, no sense of time passing. The hallway stretched endlessly, the walls tilting inward as if daring me to move. I took a step, then another, my sneakers squeaking on the polished floor, each sound swallowed by the oppressive silence. I knew this building. I'd taken classes here for 3 years. But now, it was unrecognizable, a distorted mirror of itself. Doors, I swore, led to classrooms open to blank walls. Signs pointed to exits that looped back to where I started. My breath quickened, shallow and sharp, as panic clawed at my throat. "This isn't real," I whispered. But the words felt hollow, like shouting into a void. Then from behind, a sound shattered the stillness. Fast, heavy footsteps, pounding like a drumbeat of pursuit. I spun around, heart hammering, and saw him. The bald man, the professor, sprinting toward me, his face twisted with something not quite human, eyes wide and empty. "Run!" my mind screamed, an embedded command that seized my limbs. I bolted, the hallway blurring into streaks of white and gray, my pulse a deafening roar in my ears. The footsteps grew louder, closer, relentless. I could feel his presence, a weight pressing against my back as if the air itself was conspiring to slow me down. My legs burned, my lungs ached, but I didn't dare look back. "Keep moving," I urged myself, the words a trance loop anchoring me. To survival, I rounded a corner, nearly crashing into a wall, and saw the glow of the cafeteria ahead, its lights a beacon of reality. I burst through the doors, collapsing against a table, gasping for air. The room was alive with the clatter of trays and the murmur of students, a stark contrast to the nightmare I'd escaped. I scanned the entrance, expecting to see him, but the hallway was empty, silent, as if nothing had happened. My hands trembled, slick with sweat, as I checked the time. Only 12 minutes had passed since I'd sat on the couch, but it felt like hours. A lifetime trapped in that warped corridor. Later I learned something that turned my blood to ice. That professor, the one who'd asked for directions, had been teaching in the social science building for nearly a decade. Why would he need to ask where it was? Worse, I remembered seeing him at the campus store where I worked, not once, but every shift for a week before this. Always buying trivial things, a pen, a candy bar. Always watching me, his eyes lingering too long. I'd brushed it off as coincidence, but now it felt like a predator circling, waiting for the right moment. After that day, I never saw him again. Not in the store, not on campus, nowhere. It was as if he'd dissolved into the air, a phantom who'd slipped through the cracks of reality. I told a friend about it. A girl who'd grown up in a small town where people whispered about spirits that haunted empty places. She said sometimes, the world glitches, pulling you into a space that's neither here nor there, a test you're not meant to pass. Her words stuck with me, a nested story that made my experience feel less like madness and more like something ancient, unknowable. That day, I escaped something, but I still don't know what. Was it a trick of my mind, a spirit, or something worse? All I know is this: the next time you rest in a quiet place, listen closely. The silence might not be as empty as you think. It was a summer evening in Salt Lake City, where Mormon churches stand like sentinels on every block, their spires piercing the desert sky. I wasn't part of their faith, a stranger in their world, but my best friend was my anchor, pulling me. into his orbit of rituals and laughter. That night, in the heart of a holy place, I met something that carved itself into my soul. A terror I can't unsee. Salt Lake City was a maze of belief, its streets lined with churches that glowed with promise. My friend, a devout Mormon, was my guide through this world, his enthusiasm infectious. We were inseparable. Two boys chasing thrills in a city that felt too vast for our small lives. Young men's, their version of Boy Scouts, was our playground. Weekly, gatherings of games, lessons, and stories under the watchful eyes of elders who carried the weight of faith. But this night was different, a barbecue that drew families like moths to a flame, their voices a warm hum against the twilight's chill. The church lawn buzzed with life, tables laden with food, string lights swaying in the breeze. Beyond the sea, glow though, the church's unlit wing loomed, a silent giant swallowing the stars. The party was a tapestry of joy, kids running, adults laughing, the air thick with the scent of charred meat and summer grass. My friend and I darted through the crowd, stealing extra cookies, dodging stern glances. But as dusk deepened, the bathrooms near the lawn became a bottleneck, lines stretching into the shadows. My friend leaned close, his voice a conspiratorial whisper, suggesting we use the ones in the church's dark half. Empty, quiet, far from the chaos. Prickle of unease crawled up my spine, like a warning carved in my bones. But necessity overruled fear. I nodded, slipping through the glass doors, leaving the warmth behind. The hallway was a chasm of shadow, its polished tiles reflecting the faint light from the distant party, barely enough to trace the walls. Each step was a betrayal, my sneakers squeaking in the stillness, as if the building held its breath. The silence wasn't empty. It was a weight, pressing against my chest, whispering that I wasn't alone. I'd heard rumors about this church, whispers of strange happenings, of figures seen in empty rooms, stories the elders dismissed as childish fancy. But in that moment, the rumors felt alive, curling around me like smoke. I pushed forward. The bathroom door, a beacon in the gloom. Inside, the bathroom was a sterile crypt, its fluorescent bulb flickering like a heartbeat on the edge of death. I stood at the sink, water splashing my face, trying to drown the unease that clung like a second skin. Something was wrong, a hum beneath the silence, like a voice trapped in the walls. My reflection stared back, eyes too wide, a boy I barely recognized. I told myself it was nothing, just the nerves of a kid who'd lingered too long on ghost stories. But the knot in my chest tightened, urging me to run, to flee this place where light seemed to falter. I dried my hands, the paper towel rasping, in the quiet, and stepped toward the door, my pulse a drum in my ears. That's when I saw it. At the drinking fountain outside, a figure stood, small and wrong, like a puppet cut from moonlight and decay. A child, no taller than my shoulder, their skin so pale it seemed to glow. A sickly sheen under the dim bulb. Their clothes hung in tatters, stained with dirt and something darker, clinging to a frame too frail to hold life. Dark marks, bruises, scars, crawled across their arms and face, a map of pain no child should bear. Their eyes met mine, and the world collapsed, time stretching into a frozen scream. They giggled, a sound like glass breaking in a storm, sharp and wrong, cutting through my soul. I choked out, "Are you okay?" My voice a stranger's, but they only giggled again, stepping toward the glass doors leading to an empty parking lot. Time shattered, seconds bleeding into eternity as I stood rooted, my heart a frantic bird, against my ribs. The child turned, their silhouette melting into the darkness beyond the doors, that laughter echoing in my skull. I ran, legs heavy as if sinking into tar, back to the party's light. The crowd's warmth was a lie, a thin veil, over the terror clawing my mind. I scanned for the child, desperate, but they were gone. A phantom burned into my vision. My friend asked why I looked pale, but I shook my head, words trapped behind fear. Who'd believe a boy claiming he saw a ghost in a house of God? That night I lay awake, the darkness thicker than ever, every shadow a reminder of that pale face. I saw them in my dreams, standing in that hallway, their laughter a chain binding me to fear. I never returned to that church, avoiding its spires like a curse. I didn't tell my friend, didn't tell my family, the weight of disbelief too heavy to bear. Years later, I learned whispers of others who'd seen things there. A child, a shadow, a giggle in the dark. The terror lingers, a scar I can't erase, a question I can't answer. What was that child, and why did it find me? The school hall was a prison of murmurs, its high windows framing a sky that churned with secrets, gray clouds rolling like waves over a hidden abyss. I was 9, a stranger in this coastal town of southwest England, where the salty wind carried whispers of the naval base just down the road. That first assembly was a haze of teachers' voices, their words dissolving into the air. But beyond the glass something stirred, a presence, heavy and unseen, as if the heavens were holding their breath, waiting for me to look up. The move had come suddenly, my mother and I landing in this windswept corner of the UK where cliffs crumbled into the sea. The school was an old brick building, its corridors thick with the scent of damp plaster and chalk dust, perched 500 meters from a naval base, a fortress of steel gates and silent submarines that haunted the deep. I didn't dwell on it then, just another oddity in a world I was still piecing together. But that morning, as the head teacher's voice droned like a distant radio, my mind slipped free, pulled by the restless tide of my attention deficit disorder. The windows loomed, their streaked panes glinting with a light that felt too sharp, too alive, urging me to see what lay beyond. Have you ever felt a sky turn into a mirror, reflecting something you were never meant to know? The clouds were a heavy shroud, slate gray and restless, pressing against the earth like a secret kept too long. But as I stared, they began to part, a thin seam of paler gray splitting the darkness. There in the breach hung something impossible, a vast triangular shape, its edges razor-sharp, its surface a dark metallic sheen that swallowed the light. It didn't drift or shimmer like a plane, didn't flicker like a mirage. It was still, impossibly still, a monument carved into the sky, hovering just above the distant trees. My heart stuttered, my fingers digging into the wooden chair, the world narrowing to that single, silent form. The shape was immense, larger than any aircraft I'd glimpsed on TV, its 3 points stark against the shifting clouds. It wasn't high, not lost in the vastness of space like a satellite, but close, far too close, its presence pressing down like a weight on my chest. I blinked, waiting for it to dissolve, to reveal itself as a trick of the clouds, but it held firm, solid, and unyielding, its surface gleaming with a cold, unnatural light. The air in the hall grew thin, the chatter of classmates fading to a dull roar as if time itself had slowed, trapping me in a moment where only the shape existed. "Look closer," a voice inside me whispered, "before it sees you first." My breath caught my eyes burning from staring, but I couldn't look away, caught in the grip of awe and dread. The naval base flashed in my mind, its submarines and secrets now a shadow behind the shape. Was it theirs? Some hidden machine born of steel and science? Or was it something else, something older, watching the base as it watched me? The thought sent a shiver through me, cold and sharp, my hands trembling as I gripped the chair tighter. The shape's edges seemed to pulse, not with movement but with intent, as if it knew I was there, a small figure in a crowded hall, staring into its domain. "What are you?" I thought, the question a silent scream in my skull. "What do you do when the world shows you something that breaks its own rules?" I leaned forward, my chair shifting beneath me, and a whisper escaped my lips. "Is that normal?" The words were too loud, cutting through the assembly's hum, and the boy beside me elbowed my arm. "Be quiet. You'll get us caught," he hissed, his voice pulling me back to the hall. I flinched, my gaze darting to him, then back to the window. The clouds were closing now, a thick tide of gray swallowing the shape, their edges curling like fingers over a secret. I waited, heart pounding for the shape to move, to streak away or vanish in a flash, but it didn't. One moment it was there, a silent giant in the sky, and the next, it was gone, erased as if the heavens had reclaimed it. The sky was whole, again heavy and unbroken, but its emptiness felt like a lie. I sank back, my hands clammy, the assembly's noise crashing over me like a tide. The teacher's voice droned on, the other kids fidgeted, oblivious to the rift I'd glimpsed. Was real? The question clawed at me, sharp and relentless. I was just a kid, restless and bored, with no stories of UFOs or conspiracies to frame what I'd seen. Yet the memory burned, vivid and unyielding. The shape's edges, its cold gleam, and the feeling that I'd stumbled into something forbidden. The naval base loomed larger now, its gates a silent question in my mind. Had they seen it too? Their radars catching a blip that didn't belong? Or was I the only one, marked by a moment I couldn't explain? Years later, that morning is a ghost that haunts me, its edges as sharp as the shape itself. I've replayed it 1,000 times, the triangle's form etched in my memory like a scar. It wasn't just what I saw, 3 points, dark and metallic, but the weight it carried, a presence that felt alive, aware. Friends I've told laugh it off, blaming a child's imagination, a cloud twisted by light. But I know what I felt, the chill that wasn't just fear, but the brush of something vast, something that didn't belong in our sky. I pass that school sometimes, its windows still tall and watchful, and I look up, half expecting the clouds to part again. The sky stays silent, but its quiet is a deception, and I wonder if that shape is still out there, waiting for another pair of eyes to find it. The carton of eggs sat on the table, its edges frayed, the white cardboard smudged with dirt. He held it like a talisman, his fingers tracing the lid, his eyes locked on me across the polished dining room. I was 15, a waitress in a 5-star restaurant. But in that moment I felt like prey. His smile was too wide, his gaze too heavy, and the air around him seemed to hum with something wrong. I didn't know then that he'd follow me, that his shadow would stretch beyond these walls, but I felt it. A whisper of dread, cold and unshakable. It was Easter Sunday 2022, the restaurant buzzing with the clink of glasses and the murmur of wealthy patrons. I wove through the tables, my apron starched, my smile practiced. The town was small, idyllic, the kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. But when Mr. Harrow walked in, the air shifted. He was older, maybe 40, his 3-piece suit crisp but oddly out of place, like he'd dressed for a role. He hadn't rehearsed. The eggs were the strangest part. Why carry them into a Michelin-starred restaurant? I brushed it off, seating him in my section. "Drink order?" I asked, pen poised. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned forward, his eyes glinting under the chandelier light. "What's your name, sweetheart? What do you do when you're not here? Got big plans after school?" His questions came too fast, too personal, each one tightening the knot in my stomach. I mumbled answers, kept it professional, and hurried away. When he left, I exhaled, thinking it was over. But it wasn't. Over the next 2 months, Mr. Harrow became a fixture, appearing 2 or 3 times a week, always with that carton of eggs, always in my section. The restaurant's glow felt dimmer. When he was there, the polished wood and soft music no longer a shield. He'd flirt, his voice oily, suggesting we grab a drink after my shift. I'd laugh it off, my heart racing, my eyes scanning for my manager, Sarah. Feel his eyes on you, don't you? The thought crept in, uninvited, as I poured his wine. Then, one evening, it got worse. I was leading him to his table, the restaurant, half empty when his hand slid down my back, lingering where it shouldn't. My breath caught, my body freezing as his fingers brushed lower. I spun around, forcing a calm I didn't feel. "Please don't touch me," I said, my voice steady. Despite the tremor in my chest, "I'm 15, you know that." His smile didn't falter, but he stepped back, murmuring an apology that felt like a lie. I didn't serve him that day, and Sarah took over. A week later, during a quiet shift, everyone was on break, leaving me alone on the floor. The restaurant's rule was table service only, but Mr. Harrow walked in, ignoring the hostess stand. Before I could react, his hands were on my arms, gripping just tight enough to make my skin crawl. His breath was warm, too close, as he whispered, "You're too pretty to be so cold." I wrenched free, repeating, "Don't touch me." My voice louder now, echoing in the empty dining room. He left, and for months I didn't see him. I thought he was gone, a bad memory fading like the town's autumn leaves. But the town had stories, whispers of strangers who lingered too long, who watched from the edges. I'd heard them at the cafe, from older waitresses who'd seen men like him before. "They never really leave," one said, her eyes distant. I didn't believe her then. Easter 2023 came, and with it Mr. Harrow. The restaurant was prepared this time. Sarah and the team kept me away from his table, their faces grim as they whispered about his return. But the restaurant couldn't protect me outside. I walked to work each day, a 25-minute trek from the train station through the town center, the streets lined with quaint shops and flickering lamps. One morning, as I hurried along, a car's engine growled behind me, too close. I glanced back, his car, sleek and black, crawling at my pace. My pulse spiked, my legs moving faster, but he followed. Windows down, that same smile cutting through the dawn. I reached the restaurant, breathless, and told Sarah. "Stay away from him," she said, her voice sharp with worry. A week later, I was sipping coffee at a shop 15 minutes from work, the morning sun warm on my face. Footsteps approached, deliberate. I looked up, and there he was. No car this time, just him, his eggs tucked under his arm, his eyes boring into mine. I ran, my coffee spilling, and made it to work, locking the door behind me. He didn't follow, but he'd asked for me that day, telling Sarah he knew I was there. His voice calm but insistent. He vanished after that, or so I thought. I took holidays around Easter 2024, buried in exams, and heard he'd come looking. For me, his visits brief when I wasn't around. The town felt smaller now, its charm tainted by his shadow. I'd catch myself glancing over my shoulder, expecting his car, his face, those eggs. He's still out there, isn't he? The thought clung to me, a weight I couldn't shake. Easter 2025 is coming, and with it, a dread that pools in my gut. The restaurant will be packed, the streets alive with festival lights, but I know he'll be there waiting, his eggs in hand, his eyes searching. And this time, I'm not sure I can outrun him. The night was soft, warm with the glow of friendship. but a shadow waited in the corners, its fingers itching to touch. 5 years ago, at 21, I was a university student in London, my world a blur of lectures and laughter. That evening, I sat across from my friend Sarah at a cozy restaurant, our plates piled with pasta, our glasses holding a single pour of red wine. The wine was a formality, a toast to our rare night together, but it left me clear-headed, my senses sharp as we walked back to her flat. Her home was a haven, or so I thought. The flat was small, its walls papered in faded florals, the air heavy with the scent of lavender candles and old wood. Sarah's double bed, draped in soft linens, promised rest, and I sank into it gratefully, my body tired but my mind alive with the night's warmth. But something else was awake, something that didn't belong. Sarah was in her ensuite bathroom, the faint hum of her toothbrush, a comforting rhythm. I lay on my side, facing the open door, the bathroom's light spilling across the floor in a golden pool. The room was quiet, save for the distant hum of London's streets, a lullaby of city life. Then it came, a touch uninvited, unnatural. A hand, cold and deliberate, pressed against my back, its long nails dragging from my neck to the base of my spine. The sensation was vivid, each nail a sharp, tickling line that burned into my skin, as real as any human touch. My breath caught, my body frozen in a moment of disbelief. This isn't happening, but it was. The nails lingered, a slow, intentional scrape as if savoring my fear. Turn around, a voice in my head urged, but my muscles locked, terror rooting me to the bed. Finally, I forced myself to spin, my heart slamming against my ribs, and faced the other side of the room. For a heartbeat, he was there. A man, tall and gaunt, stood against the far wall 5 meters away, his figure etched in the dim light. Middle-aged, his face was a mask of sharp angles, but his eyes, God, his eyes, were twin voids, boring into mine with an intensity that stripped me bare. They didn't blink, didn't waver, just held me in a grip I couldn't escape. His presence was wrong, a violation of the world's rules, like a figure painted into a scene where he didn't belong. "Who are you?" I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone, swallowed by the weight of his gaze. Then, in a blink, he vanished, leaving only the echo of his stare and the phantom burn of those nails on my skin. "Sarah!" I cried, my voice breaking, tears streaming down my face as I stumbled from the bed. She rushed in, toothbrush still in hand, her eyes wide with alarm. "What's wrong?" she asked, but I could barely speak, my words tumbling out in gasps. A hand, a man, he was here. Sarah's face crumpled, and she sank onto the bed, her own tears falling. "Why are you crying?" I asked, my voice trembling. She looked at me, her lips quivering, and said, "I felt it too." My blood ran cold. For months, she confessed, she'd sensed a presence in this room, a weight in the corners, eyes watching from the shadows. She showed me texts to her boyfriend, sent weeks ago. "I can't sleep, something's watching me." Her words were a mirror to my fear, a confirmation that what I'd felt wasn't a dream, wasn't madness. We weren't alone. The room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap, its walls closing in, the air thick with a malice we couldn't see. We sat there, clutching each other, the candle's flame flickering as if mocking our terror, until dawn's light crept through the curtains, offering a fragile reprieve. Days later, I learned the truth, and it broke me. Sarah's flat was 2 doors down from the former home of a notorious serial killer, a man who'd hunted young women in London's shadows decades ago. I found the articles online, his name a stain on the city's history, his crimes a catalog of horror. Had he left something behind? A piece of his darkness, a shard of his soul, clinging to these walls? The thought haunted me, a specter I couldn't shake. 5 years on, at 26, I still feel those nails in my dreams. Still see his eyes when I close mine. That touch, that gaze, they marked me. I've told almost no one, knowing how it sounds, crazy, impossible, but it was real. As real as the bed I lay in, as real as Sarah's tears. And sometimes, in the quiet of my own room, I swear I feel a faint scrape down my back, a reminder that some doors, once opened, never truly close. The Texas night was suffocating, a humid shroud that pressed against my skin as I sat in the fire station's break room. I was 22, a green EMT student on my final ride-along, my last chance to prove I could handle the chaos of saving lives. The station was a fortress of concrete and fluorescent lights, its air thick with the stale scent of instant coffee and engine oil. My notebook lay open, filled with protocols I'd memorized but never felt, my pulse quickening with the hope of a real call. It was 10 p.m., and the city outside, a small, rough-edged sprawl east of Dallas, was alive with shadows. "This is your moment," I whispered to myself, craving the rush that would make it all real. The radio crackled, sharp and urgent. "Female unknown status under the 5th Street Bridge." My mentor, Sarah, a paramedic with eyes like steel, grabbed her kit. "Probably another drunk," she said, but her voice carried an edge, a warning I didn't yet understand. I followed her to the ambulance, my heart pounding, the red lights flashing like a heartbeat against the night. The city blurred past, neon signs, empty lots, the forgotten corners where life frayed at the seams. The bridge loomed ahead, a massive slab of concrete over a dry creek, its underbelly a graveyard of dreams where the homeless carved out their existence. We stopped at the edge, the ambulance's lights painting the scene in pulses of crimson. The air hit me first, a rancid mix of urine, rot, and something sweeter, more sinister, that clawed at my throat. Sarah's flashlight sliced through the darkness, revealing a patchwork of tents, their tarps and ropes woven into a desperate shelter. My boots sank into the gravel, each step heavier as if the ground itself resisted my presence. "Stay sharp," I told myself, an embedded command to anchor my nerves, but the air felt wrong, charged with a silent dread. In the heart of the encampment, we found her. A woman, maybe in her 40s, sat cross-legged in a muddy ditch, her back to us, her shoulders hunched like a predator guarding its kill. Her hair was a matted snarl, caked with dirt, and her clothes hung in tatters, barely clinging to her frame. She was absorbed in something, her hands moving with a feverish rhythm, as if the world beyond her didn't exist. Sarah's light caught her silhouette and a chill snaked down my spine, a premonition I couldn't shake. "Ma'am, we're here to help," Sarah called, her voice steady but tight. The woman didn't move, only spat a curse, her hands never glowing. We edged closer, the ditch's damp earth sucking at my boots, the smell intensifying. A putrid wave that coated my tongue, my lungs, my thoughts. I squinted, trying to decipher her actions, and then I saw it. No, this can't be real. Her legs were exposed, stretched out in the dirt, and her feet were a grotesque tableau of decay. The skin was a patchwork of purple, yellow, and green, peeling, a way to reveal raw, oozing flesh. Her toes were black, crumbling like charred wood, and in her hands she clutched a pair of rusted kitchen scissors, their blades flashing as she carved at her own body. Piece of flesh fell away, swallowed by the mud, and she continued, her movements precise, almost ritualistic. My stomach lurched, my vision narrowing to that single unthinkable act. Sarah's breath hitched, her flashlight trembling, and I felt my legs weaken, the world tilting under me. The woman's head tilted slightly, her eyes vacant as if pain was a memory she'd erased. "Ain't going nowhere," she growled, her voice a rasp that cut through the silence, and resumed her work. The scissors moved again, and I saw, the worst of it, tiny insects crawling in her wounds, their writhing forms a silent horror that screamed louder than any sound. "Get out," my mind begged, but I was rooted, trapped in a trance loop of revulsion. The smell was a living thing now, invading every sense, a decay so profound it felt like it would never leave me. Sarah retched, stumbling back to vomit against a tarp, but I couldn't move, couldn't look away. I'd seen death in my mortuary. Job, bodies cold and still. But this was alive, deliberate, a defiance of life itself. A memory surfaced, unbidden. A story from my instructor about a patient who'd mutilated himself to escape his demons, believing pain was his only truth. "Some people break so completely they rewrite suffering as survival," she'd said. That nested tale anchored me now, making this woman's act feel not just horrific but inevitable. A tragedy carved in flesh and despair. It took 30 excruciating minutes to coax her onto the stretcher. She clutched the scissors, snarling. That she could fix herself, her words a desperate mantra. In the ambulance, the stench was a suffocating force, seeping into every surface, every breath. I sat across from her, my eyes burning, watching her mutter about gangrene and bandages, as if logic could mend what she'd destroyed. Her feet, now loosely wrapped, bled through the gauze, the stain spreading like an accusation. At the hospital, the ER doctor, a familiar face from my clinicals, took over, his calm a stark contrast to her screams about her cure. We scrubbed the ambulance for hours, disinfectant stinging our hands, but the smell clung, a phantom that haunted every quiet moment. Later, I learned she'd been under that bridge before, drunk on cheap vodka, her body marked with tattoos of hate. Her voice spewing slurs at the EMS, but it wasn't her words that stayed with me. It was her feet, those ruined, crawling remnants flashing in my mind at night, uninvited like a scar that refused to heal. Some horrors don't just shock you. They burrow, like those insects, into the deepest parts of you, waiting for silence to crawl back out. What if the person you love most, the one whose voice is your home, isn't always themselves? What if something else slips into their skin, walks their steps, and speaks their words, but leaves a chill no warmth can banish? That's the shadow that haunts me, cast by my mother Linda, in a town where the familiar turned treacherous. She was my compass, a DoorDash driver threading through our sleepy streets, her presence a shield against the world. But for years, strangers saw her in places she'd never been, spoke to her when she was nowhere near, and smiled at a figure that wore her face but wasn't her. This is the story of the thing that stole her identity, a phantom that chased us across cities and years, its gaze a blade in the dark. Linda was the pulse of our family, her days a blur of deliveries, her car a canvas of takeout bags and laughter. At 49, she carried a life etched in crow's feet and kindness, her voice a melody that could hush my fears. But in our small town, something else echoed her, a mimic that turned warmth to ice. It started with a whisper, a cashier at the gas station nodding as if Linda had just left, though she'd been home knitting all morning. "Back so soon, Linda," they'd say, their eyes glinting with a familiarity that didn't belong. The air in that moment felt heavy, like a dream where the edges blur, reality slipping through my fingers. She'd laugh, blaming the town's tight-knit ways, but I saw the flicker in her gaze, a question she buried deep. The incidents grew, each one a shard in a mosaic of unease. At the diner, a waitress slid a coffee to Linda, asking about her morning order, though she hadn't visited in months. The booth seemed to shrink, the world outside the window a stranger's painting, warped and wrong. At the post office, a clerk mentioned a package she'd supposedly fumbled with days before, but no record existed, no trace of her visit. Each encounter was a thread, weaving a net that tightened around us, pulling us into a truth we couldn't name. Linda brushed it off, her smile a shield, but I felt the weight of her silence the way her hands trembled when she thought I wasn't looking. What if these weren't mistakes? What if something was out there, cloaked in her likeness? The strangest came through my aunt and uncle. They'd stopped at the market where a woman stood by the fruit stalls, her hair catching the sun just like Linda's. She spoke with Mom's cadence, her words a perfect mirror of family tales, her laugh a note-for-note echo. My uncle called her Linda, and she nodded, her answers seamless as if she'd lived our lives. But my aunt, returning from a stall, froze, her voice a hiss. "That's not Linda," she said, her eyes locked on the woman's face. Something was wrong. Her smile stretched too far, her eyes too still, like a portrait painted over something lifeless. The woman met my aunt's gaze, then drifted into the crowd, leaving a chill that clung like frost. My uncle insisted it was her, but my aunt's words were a splinter burrowing into my mind. We thought the town was the problem, its streets a web that trapped us in this strangeness. So we fled, moving 9 hours away. A new city with clean skies and no echoes, but escape was a fragile hope, shattered by the same shadow. 2 weeks in, a barista greeted Linda like an old friend, asking about her earlier visit, though she'd been unpacking boxes all day. The cup slipped in her hand, her face ashen as if the world had betrayed her. A stranger at the grocery store spoke of a chat they'd never had, their smile a blade that cut through our new life. I stood there, watching a man nod at her, his eyes holding a secret she couldn't claim, my heart a drum in the silence. Years later, I still feel it, that presence, a twin of my mother, walking paths she never took, speaking words she never shaped. Linda doesn't speak of it, but I see it in her pauses, the way she lingers at mirrors as if searching for herself. I've heard whispers of others in that town, faces seen twice, names spoken in error, a shadow that mimics and vanishes. The fear is a scar, a question that gnaws. What is this thing, this thief of her face, and why does it hunt us? I ask you because I'm lost. Do you know? The apartment was a borrowed sanctuary, its walls humming with the faint pulse of a city summer. But as I sank into the couch that first evening, a chill settled over me, like a breath from something unseen. It was 2014, and my girlfriend and I, fresh out of college, had escaped our parents' homes for a week in her brother's ground floor flat, a rare taste of freedom. He'd warned us it was haunted, his words half joking, but we laughed it off, our skepticism a shield against the unknown. Yet as the TV flickered, casting shadows across the room, I felt it, a presence subtle but insistent, watching from the edges of the light. The flat was small, cluttered with her brother's things, mismatched furniture, a sagging couch, and a kitchen counter piled with dishes. We were giddy, untethered, planning lazy days and late nights without curfews. That first evening we sprawled on the couch, a movie droning in the background, our takeout containers strewn across the coffee table. The windows were open, the city's hum seeping in, but the air inside felt heavier, as if the flat held its breath. Have you ever sat in a room and felt it shift, like the walls themselves are keeping secrets? That's how it started. A moment of stillness broken by a sharp clatter from the kitchen. We froze, eyes darting to the doorway. There, in the middle of the linoleum floor, lay a plastic cup, its edges glinting under the fluorescent light. It had been on the counter, untouched, and we hadn't stepped foot in the kitchen since arriving. We exchanged glances, her brow furrowing as she crossed the room. The cup sat alone, far from the counter's edge, as if nudged by an unseen hand. "Maybe it was the wind," I said, but my voice sounded hollow, the words unconvincing even to me. She picked it up, her fingers lingering on its surface, and placed it back, her eyes scanning the empty kitchen. We returned to the movie, but the air had changed, charged with a tension that clung to us like damp cloth. "Something's here," thought whispered unbidden, and I pushed it down, focusing on the screen's glow. The next day, we shook off the unease, diving into the summer's heat. We left after breakfast, the flat's windows sealed tight against the city's noise, and spent the day wandering, laughing, free. But when we returned in the late afternoon, the flat greeted us with a stillness that felt wrong, like a held breath waiting to exhale. In the kitchen, another object lay on the floor, a large plastic gym shaker, its lid askew, sprawled as if tossed. My girlfriend's face paled, her hand tightening around mine. "This was on the counter," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my throat dry, and we picked it up, the shaker's weight heavy in my hands. We didn't speak. Of it, not really. Just muttered about clumsiness or drafts, but the truth hung between us, unspoken. Something was moving things, and it wasn't us. What do you do when the ordinary turns sinister? When your refuge becomes a trap? That night we barricaded ourselves in routine, closing curtains to block the street's gaze, shutting windows to muffle the traffic. The bedroom was stifling, the air thick with summer's heat. But we clung to normalcy, slipping into bed with forced calm. I drifted toward sleep, the mattress creaking beneath us when my girlfriend's hand gripped my arm, her breath sharp. "Look up," she said, her voice trembling. I opened my eyes and my heart lurched. The ceiling lamp, a heavy fixture on a long cord, was spinning, fast, impossibly fast, its arc a perfect circle, as if seized by an invisible force. The room was still, no breeze, no sound, just the lamp's silent whirl, its shadow dancing across the walls like a specter. I stared, my body frozen, my mind grappling for an explanation. It's not real, I thought, but the lamp's motion was undeniable, its cord taut, defying gravity. My girlfriend's nails dug into my arm, her breath shallow, and I felt it too. A presence cold and heavy pressing down on us. "Stay still," a voice inside me urged. "Don't let it know you see." The lamp slowed, its arc faltering, and I closed my eyes, willing sleep to take me. But the image burned behind my lids. She stayed awake, she told me later, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, waiting for it to move again. Morning came, gray and heavy, the flat unchanged but alien. She was shaken, her eyes hollow, but we didn't speak of it, not then. We packed the unease away, left the flat days later, and let our relationship fade by fall. Years later, the memory is a wound that never heals. 8 years on, in a different city, I ran into her by chance, her face lighting up with recognition. Over drinks, I asked if she remembered that summer. The lamp, her smile vanished, her voice low. "It terrified me," she said, her eyes distant, as if seeing it spin again. That flat, that week became a shared scar, a moment where the world cracked open, revealing something we couldn't name. I drive by that street sometimes, the building unchanged, its windows dark. I don't stop, but I feel it still, an unseen hand, waiting in the dark, ready to move what shouldn't. The glow was what I saw first, a shimmering veil of purple and green like a bruise on the edge of reality. It hovered just beyond my bedroom door, drifting silently through the lit hallway, as if the world held its breath. I was a child, crouched on my carpet with a scattering of Lego bricks, but in that moment I wasn't alone. The air turned cold, heavy with a presence that didn't belong, and my heart stuttered, caught between wonder and terror. Something was here, and it wasn't human. Winter in Poland, 2009, wrapped our small village in a shroud of snow, the kind that muffled every sound and made the nights stretch into eternity. I was young, maybe 8 or 9, still small enough to believe in the magic of Christmas, but old enough to sense the shadows that lingered in the corners of our old house. Christmas Eve had passed a few days ago, leaving me with a new Lego set, Eerie Castle, its turrets half built on the carpet of my bedroom. The room was my sanctuary, warmed by the soft hum of a radiator, the overhead light casting a golden pool around me. My bed sat against the wall, its blankets rumpled, a stuffed bear perched on the pillow. Beyond the open door, the hallway glowed, its single bulb stark against the wooden banister that framed the staircase. Downstairs, my parents, Marek and Anna, were in the living room, their voices a faint murmur over the crackle of the fireplace. I felt safe, cocooned in the familiar, or so I thought. I snapped a brick into place, my fingers steady as I built a drawbridge for my imaginary nights. The house was still, but it was the kind of stillness that pressed against my ears, amplifying every small sound, the groan of the radiator, the faint whistle of wind through the window cracks, the creak of the floorboards settling. The snow outside was a heavy blanket, glowing faintly under the moonlight, its weight muffling the world beyond. I was lost in my game, my mind filled with stories of dragons and heroes, when a flicker caught my eye, a shadow passing through the hallway's light, too slow, too deliberate. Can you feel it watching you? The thought slipped into my mind uninvited, sending a shiver down my spine. I glanced up, my breath catching, my hands pausing mid-motion. From the left side of the doorframe, something emerged, its movement so slow it seemed to crawl through time. It was a figure, no taller than a child, perhaps 1.5 meters, but its form was wrong, unnatural. It floated, 0.5 meter off the ground, its legs bent at sharp angles, its back hunched as if weighed by an invisible burden. A strange aura clung to it, a pulsing mix of purple and celadon, shimmering like a mirage, blurring the edges of its form. It wore clothes, dark purple pants, a formal shirt that seemed too stiff, and black leather shoes that gleamed despite the dim light, but they looked out of place as if stolen from another time. Its head was too large, grotesque in its disproportion, with a tangle of black hair that fell in clumps, framing ears that jutted out like bat wings. I saw it in profile, its cheekbones sharp as blades, its nose hooked like a hawk's. But where a face should have been, there was only shadow. No eyes, no mouth, just a void that seemed to pull at the light. My hands froze, the Lego brick slipping from my fingers to the carpet. The figure drifted to the right, silent, its aura trailing like a comet's tail, casting faint glimmers on the banister. The hallway's light flickered, as if struggling against the darkness it brought. My heart pounded, a frantic rhythm in my chest, and I wanted to scream, but my throat locked tight, my body rooted to the floor. Pretend you didn't see it, I thought, panic flooding me like icy water. I forced my eyes down, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the bricks, building a wall that couldn't shield me from what I'd seen. The room felt smaller, the air thick with a weight I couldn't name, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. I'd heard stories whispered by the older kids in our village, tales of spirits that lingered in the snow-covered forests, of children who'd seen things in the dead of winter and never spoke again. They said the land remembered the wars, the cries of the lost echoing through the pines, and that some houses, like ours, held onto those echoes. I'd laughed then, rolling my eyes at their ghost stories, but now, with that thing drifting through my hallway, the tales felt like warnings. The figure moved with purpose, as if it belonged here more than I did, its presence a violation of the safety my room had always promised. I could still feel it even with my eyes down, the air growing colder, the light dimming, the faint hum of its aura like a distant hymn. Seconds stretched into eternity, each one a battle between fear and curiosity. My hands shook as I stacked another brick, my breath shallow, my mind racing. What if it's still there? The question gnawed at me, a reckless pull to look again. I lifted my eyes, just a fraction, my head still bowed, my heart hammering so loud I thought it would betray me. It was still there. Part of its form lingered in the doorframe, the purple-green glow pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat from another world. My chest tightened, a scream trapped in my throat. Then, slowly, it drifted out of sight, leaving only the hallways empty, light, stark and cold. I sat, paralyzed, the Lego castle forgotten. The house groaned, a low creak from the stairs, as if something heavy had shifted its weight. My skin prickled, every nerve screaming to run. I pictured my parents downstairs, Marek's deep laugh, Anna's gentle humming, the couch a beacon of warmth and safety. But the hallway stood between us, a gauntlet I wasn't sure I could cross. The air felt alive now, charged with a presence that lingered just out of sight, its weight pressing against me. I counted to 10, then 20, my breath shallow, my hands clenching the carpet until my knuckles turned white. Finally, courage or panic won. I bolted, my feet pounding the carpet, my eyes fixed on the door. I didn't look right, didn't dare, but I felt it. A presence heavy and ancient brushing the edge of my awareness, its aura a cold whisper against my skin. The stairs blurred beneath me, each step a gamble, the banister slick under my sweaty palms. I reached the living room and collapsed onto the couch beside Anna, her warmth a lifeline. Marek glanced over, his brow furrowed, but I said nothing. My voice was gone, drained by the terror that still pulsed in my veins. I couldn't explain, couldn't face their disbelief. The figure hadn't looked at me, hadn't acknowledged me. But its existence was enough to shatter the safety I'd taken for granted. For days, my room felt tainted, the door a portal I feared to approach. I avoided playing there, my Lego castle left unfinished, a monument to that night. I never told my friends, never spoke of it until years later, when drinks loosened my tongue and I whispered vague hints of something I couldn't explain. Even now, I question it. Was it a dream, a trick of a child's mind? But that second glance, that lingering glow, anchors the memory in truth. It was there, drifting through my world, and somewhere in the shadows of that house, it might still be waiting. Its aura a silent promise of something I'll never understand. The night was a blanket, heavy and warm, but beneath it something stirred, something that knew my name and hungered for my fear. In 1986, I was 5, a tiny soul adrift in a world too vast to grasp, living in an apartment complex that seemed to breathe with the weight of its own history. Built in the 1940s, during the shadowed years of World War II, the building was a relic of survival, its walls sagging under decades of neglect, its corridors whispering with the groans of ancient pipes and the creaks of floorboards worn thin by forgotten footsteps. We'd moved in when I was too young to sense the darkness woven into its bones, but old enough by 5 to feel its gaze. The air was always thick, a mix of damp plaster, faint mildew, and the metallic tang of rust that seeped from the radiators. The hallways were dim, lit by flickering bulbs that buzzed like trapped insects, casting shadows that danced in the corners of my vision. My parents called it home, but to me, it was a labyrinth, each room hiding secrets I couldn't name. The basement was the heart of its past, a cavernous space we rarely ventured into, where a fallout shelter stood as a monument to fear. I'd crept down there once, clutching my father's hand, my small fingers trembling as I peered into the gloom. Gas masks hung on rusted hooks, their glass eyes glinting like those of dead things, staring through me as if they knew something I didn't. Tins of food, their labels peeling, sat in crumbling stacks, their contents long turned to dust. Faded posters clung to the walls, their colors bled out, shouting enlistment slogans in a language of urgency that felt alien to my young mind. This place was meant to protect, my father had said, but it felt like a tomb, its air heavy with the weight of wars I'd never know. I didn't understand then, not at 2, but by 5, I felt the apartment's pulse, a rhythm that wasn't mine, a heartbeat that thrummed through the walls and into my dreams. The disturbances began subtly, creeping into my world like shadows at dusk. My toys, plastic cars, a teddy bear with one glass eye would come alive in the dead of night, their mechanisms humming though their batteries had been removed months ago. I'd wake to find my dolls rearranged, their porcelain faces turned toward me from corners I hadn't placed them in, their painted smiles too wide, too knowing. My radio, a boxy thing with a cracked dial, would sputter to life, spitting static that sounded like whispers, only to fall silent when my parents entered, their footsteps a shield I clung to. "It's your imagination," my mother would soothe, her voice a warm cocoon, while my father's stern frown dismissed it as childish nonsense. But I knew better. I felt it in the way the air shifted, in the chill that kissed my skin when I was alone, in the weight of unseen eyes that followed me from room to room. Something was awake in this apartment, something that had waited decades to stir, and it had chosen me to haunt. My bedroom was my sanctuary, or so I thought. A tiny kingdom of stuffed animals on sagging shelves, crayon drawings taped to the walls, a faded rug underfoot that smelled of dust and my mother's lavender soap. The ceiling bore water stains, their shapes like faces that watched me sleep, and the air was always heavy, as if the room itself held its breath. 2 windows flanked my bed, their wooden frames warped by time, their paint peeling in long, curling drips. The right window opened smoothly, letting in the faint hum of the city, a lullaby of distant cars and streetlights. The left was cursed, stiff, rebellious, its glass cloudy with age, streaked with grime that no cloth could clean. It refused to stay open without a wooden board jammed beneath, a ritual my father performed with a sigh each summer. That night, the left window became my nightmare. I woke to a sound, sharp and brutal, like a hammer against wood, yanking me from the soft haze of sleep. My heart pounded, a frantic drum in the silence, as my eyes fought to pierce the darkness. What was that? The room was still, my toys frozen in their places, my rug a patchwork of moonlight, but the air felt wrong, thick with a presence that pressed against my skin, as if the shadows themselves had grown heavier. I scanned the room, my small hands clutching the blanket, searching for a fallen book, a toppled lamp, anything to anchor the noise to reason. The teddy bear on my shelf stared back, its glass eye catching a sliver of moonlight. And for a moment, I swore it moved, its head tilting ever so slightly. Just a trick of the light, I told myself, but my pulse quickened, a rhythm of fear I couldn't silence. Then it came again, a deafening crash from the left window, the one that shouldn't move, its echo reverberating through my bones, shaking the fragile walls of my world. My gaze locked on it, and reality shattered. The window, unpropped, immovable, began to rise, its frame groaning as if wrenched by invisible hands. The sound a low, mournful wail that sent shivers down my spine. I froze, my breath a prisoner in my throat, my 5-year-old mind clawing for sense in the impossible. "This is a dream," I whispered, squeezing my eyes shut, counting to 10 as I always did to banish nightmares, my small fists trembling beneath the blanket. But when I opened them, the window was wide open, a black maw against the night, its edges framed by a faint, unnatural glow, as if something beyond was peering in. Then it forcefully shut, the impact rattling the walls, shaking my bed, sending a stuffed animal tumbling to the floor. I'm awake. The realization was a knife, cold and sharp, slicing through my hope. The window opened again, faster now, then violently closed, opened, closed, each cycle more aggressive, more deliberate, as if mocking my terror. My body was lead, my voice trapped in my throat, my eyes glued to the window as it danced its sinister rhythm, the glass trembling with each impact. The air grew colder, sharper, as if the room itself was exhaling frost, and I felt it, a presence heavy and malevolent, filling the space where moonlight should have been. The window flew up and held, a gateway to something beyond, its frame trembling as if straining against an unseen force. Then it laughed, a sound so vile, so steeped in malice, it tore at my soul. No human throat could birth that sound. A twisted, gleeful roar, rising from the air before me as if the darkness had grown teeth and a voice. In the moonlight I glimpsed a shadow, formless yet alive, its edges flickering like smoke, its shape vaguely human but wrong, too tall, too thin, its presence a weight that crushed my chest. The laugh rolled through the room, bouncing off the walls, sinking into my bones, a promise of something ancient and cruel that had waited decades to wake. "Move!" The command snapped my paralysis, and I tore from the bed, sheets tangling like vines around my legs, my small body a tangle of panic and fabric. I stumbled, kicking free, my bare feet slapping the cold floor as I ran, my screams shredding the silence of the apartment, a raw, primal sound that echoed down the hall. I burst into my parents' room, my voice a torrent of terror, my tears soaking my cheeks as I threw myself into my mother's arms. They were awake, their faces pale in the lamplight, my mother's eyes wide with alarm as she pulled me close. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice trembling, her hands stroking my hair in a desperate attempt to soothe. I sobbed, words spilling like water, the window, the noise, the laugh, my terror a storm they couldn't calm. My mother held me tighter, her warmth a lifeline, murmuring of nightmares, of half-sleep tricks, her voice a soft cocoon I wanted to believe. But my fear was iron, my story unchanging, my small body shaking as I clung to her, the echo of that laugh still ringing in my ears. My father, stern and sleepless, bristled at my cries, his patience worn thin by the late hour. "Enough," he growled, his voice a sharp edge that cut through my mother's comfort. "It's a dream. I'll prove it." He stood, his shadow looming over me, and took my hand, his grip firm, unyielding, as he led me back to my room. I Resisted, my feet dragging, my heart hammering with every step down the darkened hall, the air growing colder, heavier as we approached my door. He doesn't know what's waiting. The room was as I'd left it. Comforter crumpled on the floor, toys scattered, the air thick with dread, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. My father bent to lift the blanket, his movements brisk, dismissive. But then he stopped, his eyes locking on the left window. It was open, wide open, no board to hold it. The moonlight poured through, casting jagged shadows across the floor, and I saw his face change, his jaw tightening, a flicker of doubt in his stern gaze. "Did you do this?" he demanded, his voice fraying at the edges, betraying a tremor I'd never heard. "No, Dad," I pleaded, tears streaming down my face, my small hands clutching his sleeve. "I told you it moved itself." He shook, his head muttering about stuck frames, his hands trembling slightly as he stepped toward the window, determined to prove his logic right. He reached to check for anything wedged beneath, his fingers brushing the sill, searching for reason in the impossible. Then it happened. The window forcefully shut, so fast it grazed his hand, a thin line of blood welling up where the frame caught his skin. He yanked back, his face ashen, his eyes wide with a fear I'd never seen in him, a fear that mirrored my own. He felt it too. His breath hitched, his hand cradling the wound, and for a moment, we stood in silence, the truth too heavy to speak. The room seemed to pulse, the shadows lengthening, the air growing colder, as if whatever had laughed was still there, watching, waiting for us to acknowledge it. We didn't speak, didn't need to. I slept in their room that night, curled in a sleeping bag on the floor, their presence a fragile shield against the thing that lingered, its laughter echoing in my mind as I drifted into uneasy sleep. That night was only the beginning. The apartment grew hungrier, its disturbances sharper, more insistent. Lights flickered in patterns that made no sense. Footsteps echoed in empty halls. Whispers slithered from the walls, their words too faint to grasp but heavy with intent. My parents' faces grew drawn, their voices hushed when they thought I couldn't hear. Their arguments about moving drowned out by the apartment's refusal to let us go. We left years later, fleeing to a new home, but the scars remained, etched into my very being. Now, at 45, I carry that night in my bones, its terror as vivid as the bed I lay in, as real as the blood on my father's hand. The window, the laugh, my father's fear, they're indelible. I've told few knowing. The skepticism that follows, the raised eyebrows, the polite smiles that mask disbelief. But I swear it happened. Something dwelled in that apartment, something tied to its war-torn past, its shelter of forgotten fears, a remnant of violence that had seeped into the walls, waiting for a child's fear to feed on. Last month, I drove past the complex, now half demolished, its skeleton exposed to the sky, and I felt it. A faint echo of that laugh watching from the ruins. The sound was distant, carried on the wind, but it knew me, knew I remembered. I pulled over, my hands trembling on the steering wheel, my breath fogging the window as I stared at the rubble, half expecting to see that window, still open, still waiting. In the quiet of my own home, when the wind rattles my windows, I brace for its voice, a reminder that some shadows never fade. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I wake to the faint sound of laughter, a whisper from a past that refuses to die, a promise that it's not done with me yet.